We're on Daf Chaf Daled Amud Aleph, page 24a. 24a, and we're about 3/4 down the page, but let's go over what we learned on Friday. So we start on the top of the page, I think, on Friday. The Gemara began with the law about putting tefillin in between one's mattress and pillow. And if it's placed in between the mattress and the pillow, the Gemara clarified, but it can't be under one's head. So in other words, a person is sleeping with the tefillin in his bed. It's under his pillow, and the Gemara earlier said that there is a question. There's an argument, Shmuel and the Brisa, if that's allowed, even if his wife is together with him, would they be allowed to have the tefillin in the on the mattress under the headrest? And Shmuel said that it's okay, it's permissible. And even though the Brisa said the opposite, the Gemara says, Rava says, we still follow Shmuel's halacha, and that was talking about where the bag of the tefillin it's under the pillow, but it's not actually under his head. Under his head would not be appropriate, but it's a little pushed over. The bag could be under the head, but not the tefillin part, not the bulging part. Then there was a statement that Bar Kapara, he would wrap the tefillin in some type of a curtain that was around the bed. And then we mentioned that Rav Shisha, Bered Ravida, he put it on top of the bench. He put the tefillin on the bench, and he placed a garment or some type of a material on top of it. And the commentaries explain that we're talking about that he put the bag. He put a garment or a cloth on top of the tefillin bag. This way, it's considered two tefillin covers. It's considered two coverings. And as we've mentioned earlier, in order for a person to have relations in the same room, there needs to be a double covering on the tefillin. There needs to be a double covering, and one of the covers cannot be exclusive for the tefillin. Now, I do want to also mention that over Shabbos, I looked up this discussion, this issue of having the tefillin bag or a talus bag be considered like a covering. And what I found is that the common opinion, the accepted view, is that a talus bag is not considered good enough to be a double covering over the tefillin. Why not? So initially, the logic that we were using was, well, it's not exclusive for tefillin. It's used for talus also. Since the talus bag is used for a talus also, we thought maybe that would be room to say it's not designated for tefillin. It's used for a talus. But that's not the way the Magen Avram, one of the main commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, says. He says that if it's designated for talus and tefillin, it's still designated for tefillin. And therefore, it would be considered it's used for tefillin. It's designated for tefillin, and that would be a problem. And that would be considered like one covering that's designated. That would be considered a covering that's designated. You need a covering that's not designated. However, in the commentaries of the Shulchan Aruch, they do come up with a solution to this problem. If a person only has their tefillin and their talus with them, and they need a double covering, you could double cover the tefillin by using. You could double cover the tefillin by using the talus. Wrap the talus around the tefillin. So the talus could be considered a second covering. Again, the talus bag is not good enough. But the talus itself, that's not designated to cover the tefillin. And therefore, the talus could be used as a second covering over the tefillin. So again, we're talking about getting a double covering for the tefillin. A talus theoretically could be considered that if it was needed, it was necessary, you could use the talus to cover the tefillin, and that would be considered a double covering. Again, the talus doesn't have the same level of holiness as the tefillin, and the tefillin would be the issue. The talus is not an issue, and therefore the talus could be used as a second covering if it was necessary. Really, it's not so practical. Where don't you normally have drawers you could stick the tefillin in, so you could put it in a drawer. And so it's not so common to have this issue, but that would be the solution. Now, Rav Hamnuna,
Rebbe?
and yes,
Tefillin bag is a cover, right?
again, it depends what you mean. There's a cover that's exclusive, and there's a cover that's not exclusive. Isaac, you're muted. You got to unmute. You've somehow pressed the wrong button, and you muted yourself.
No, I keep it muted and I press the button to unmute and then I forget to take off. Tefillin bag is only for tefillin. You're not allowed to put anything else in there. You're not even allowed to put the marker in that you use to put more black on the tefillin. I heard it's supposed to be only for the tefillin. So that's one cover, right?
Okay.
Then you have the talus bag, which is for tefillin and everything else. That doesn't count as a second cover?
No, because it's called exclusive for the tefillin. It's designated, not exclusive. Exclusive. The difference is, I'm translating the word wrong.
I put my talus, my pen, and an emergency juice in there.
Because I'll tell you why. The translation of the word kilyon, its bag, its covering, doesn't mean exclusive. It means designated.
Great.
So if you translate it as designated, then it becomes a covering it's designated for tefillin as well.
Now I have a plastic bag around the whole thing.
But now you have a plastic bag, that's considered a second covering. In other words, all the coverings that are designated for tefillin are considered all one. It's not an extra covering. The extra covering would need to be like a plastic bag that's not designated. Now keep in mind that plastic bag could be inside your tefillin bag. It doesn't have to be on the outside. The other covering could even be inside. So just some people would think that it has to be on the outside, that second covering. No, the covering that's not exclusive, it could designated could actually be inside the bag, and the other bag could be the outer bag. Doesn't matter which one is which. Yes, Ezra.
So if you're saying, Rabbi, that the talis bag in which you put in your tefillin cannot be considered as a second bag, so why can you say that the plastic bag, which covers both of them, has exactly the same kind of designation, counts as a second bag?
Actually not. According to this, it doesn't. The plastic bag, the material bag, none of them are considered as a plastic bag.
No, the second bag.
No,
we're talking about. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm confusing. There's a plastic bag that's designated for tefillin, and then there's a shopping bag that Isaac was talking about you're adding on a shopping bag.
No. I was
okay. So let me get.
One second, Ezra. What were you talking about, Isaac?
Only the plastic bag in which the talus bag.
Oh, no. I'm sorry. Oh, thanks.
So that would be like to protect the talus bag against rain.
Right.
But I also keep other junk in there. I keep my tzedakah bags, empty bag. Right. I keep a hairbrush in there. That's still considered only for the tefillin?
It's not considered exclusive for tefillin. It's considered designated for tefillin. It's still designated.
No matter how many bags I put on top,
it's meant for tefillin. That's meant for tefillin. But if you put a shopping bag, if you put it in a shopping bag, that would be the option, to make a second bag. But the plastic bag. Thank you, Ezra, for clarifying. I understood Isaac wrong.
But here's my point.
Bag that the tefillin is in, that's considered the same as the other bag. They're all designated for tefillin.
Rabbi, here's my point. My point is that the plastic bag is to cover my my talus bag, okay? And the talus bag itself happens to have inside it the tefillin. So since the second bag I've designated as being the cover for my talus bag, that should in fact be a second bag.
Well, is it used for tefillin always? Is it meant for the tefillin to be inside? Since it's meant for the tefillin to be inside, it's used to hold a bag with talus, with tefillin. It would seem that it's designated for the purpose of tefillin. If you had in mind, I'm not putting my tefillin in it, and then one day you decide you're sticking tefillin in it, then it's fine. But if initially when it was purchased and when it's used is for the talus, for the tefillin, for your pen, for this, it's meant, and you're planning on doing that for the future, that would mean that it's designated for the tefillin. Now, I will tell you that there is a few lenient opinions. The El Yerabba does say that in a place of tzedek, if need be, you can rely on, you could say that it is considered a second bag. And I think the logic is because it's not exclusive, that you could translate it to mean not as designated, but it's called exclusive. And since it's not exclusive for the tefillin, it holds the talus as well. Therefore, it will be considered a double bag. So there are those that are lenient or in scenarios, but it seems like the common understanding of the word that its bag is that it's designated to use, for in general, general for that purpose. Now, going to the other point, are you allowed to put other things in the bag? So we learned here that in the tefillin, you can't put coins. We did learn about putting coins with the tefillin, and we said, no, we're not talking about in the same, touching the tefillin. We're talking about putting them in the same bag with the tefillin, but they're not actually touching it. Now, those are really different halachas. If you remember, that was on 23b, that tzayrer adam tefillin in ma'asav, and the Gemara, so it sounded like if you designate the bag for tefillin, you would not be allowed to put coins in it. And it went to the laws of designating, hazmana, preparing something for a certain mitzvah. Now, that bag, the one for the talus, it doesn't seem to me would have any issue, because you're planning on, you don't set it aside only for tefillin, you set it aside for a talus, and you're planning on using it for a mirror, you're setting it aside for other things. So there should not be any problem of putting other things in it, at least from my understanding. I mean, of course, we could look it up in Shulchan Aruch, chapter 42, but it would seem like that second bag shouldn't be included. At some point, I'll take a look and see what it says about that. It's a different topic. Here we're talking about considering something a double bag, and that's talking about the laws of respect for the tefillin inside a bag. So it will be a different chapter in Shulchan Aruch. Okay. In any event, Susan, you have a question.
Yes. The tefillin on the head, it connects your head, and the one on your arm is your heart. So, and those are both very powerful organs of the body. Also, they're sacred organs. Okay. So what you're saying to me is that we need to double cover these sacred things. So why are we covering them up? Why are we covering? That's what I'm very confused about. Why are we
we're talking about
rather than sparing them?
We were talking about sleeping in a room with one spouse.
Okay.
And the earlier Gemara was talking about bringing it into a bathroom. But this Gemara was more respect for tefillin when one is sleeping on them or one's with his wife. So that's what we were dealing with here. And that's how this issue came up. We were talking about that it has to be double covered, even though the Gemara here doesn't talk about the double covering, but that's it's discussed in the commentaries about the double covering.
And if you're taking the tefillin in your car to the temple,
yeah,
it still has to be double covered.
Well, yeah, and that would be another halacha about not putting it on the floor. It
Right.
would be, these type of things. Would it
Let's
have to
say
be
with
double?
arms,
Well, again, what do you mean? Why would it have to be double covered in the car?
well, I would
The
think it
reason for
would.
the double covering is we're dealing with sleeping on it,
Okay, I
or
get it.
and with one's wife. That's really what
Now
we're
I
dealing with. Sleeping on it, one's with one's wife. Is it appropriate? And
Okay,
we
I
said
get
even though it's double covered, because a person can't have relations in a room with tefillin unless it's double covered. Even so, you can't sleep on top of it. That's what our Gemara was saying.
Okay, if I'm leaving my car and the
Now, if
tefillin,
you're putting it on, if you want to put it on the floor, you would need to have a double covering. That's for sure. If there's no other place to put it, you're going to be putting it down. Needs to be double covered.
okay,
If you look at yeshiva boys in the yeshiva when they daven, you'll see hundreds of tefillin bags with no other cover because they don't have a talus. So you can keep it in a tefillin bag. You just have to be careful where you then put it because you only have one separation. So you can't put it on the floor. You can't, take it in certain dirty places. But if you have it double covered, it's like insulation against wherever it is.
Right, but according to the way we explained, even the talus bag is not considered a double covering. So either way, you're stuck. Doesn't really. We don't have really.
Talus bag. I just said a double cover.
Yeah, but even the tefillin bags, they're double. They also put a plastic on the tefillin. The bachrim put a plastic on it, but it's still not considered. According to the common view, it's not considered. The plastic is not really good enough. So it comes out that the bachrim are in the same boat as the married people. You can't put tefillin on the floor, that's for sure. And even if it's in a bag, you can't put it on the floor. And the only thing would be if it's double wrapped, then that would be a bag that's not designated for tefillin. And even so, it's not appropriate to put it on the floor unless you have no other choice. So the Gemara continued, and it mentioned that the law about people sleeping in a bed, and they in one bed, two people sleeping in one bed. Can they say Shema? That's what we were dealing with. And then the question was, how does that apply? Is there a difference between sleeping with one spouse or sleeping with another person? Is there a difference? So Shmuel wanted to say that as long as you're back to back, even though you're touching, that is not a problem. Even if one's with one's wife, Rabbi Yosef said only if one is with one's wife that would be allowed. But anyone else, it would cause you to have thoughts. But if you're with one's wife, since you're familiar with her, you're used to her, it's not going to cause you to have thoughts, and therefore it will be allowed. Again, we're talking back to back, front to front. If you're facing each other front to front, it would be prohibited with men, with your wife, with even if they're not touching. But back to back is where the Gemara is talking that it would be permitted according to Shmuel, and according to Rabbi Yosef, only one's wife it would be permitted in such a case. Tosfos talked about the fact that you do need separation between your head and your erva, your private area. You also need to have a separation between your heart and your private area. And we brought from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch the reason that Hashem's presence rests more in one's head and in one's heart, and therefore it's more revealed there. And therefore there is a law that the heart and the head should not be able to see the not that it has eyes, but there should be a separation between it and the private area. So now the Gemara just brought a contradiction between two brises about two statements about sleeping back to back and reciting the Shema, and the conclusion was one of them said it's allowed, and the other one said no, you need a garment, you need some type of cloth in between, some type of a talis, mafsekas they name. You need to have a cloth or a garment that separates between you. So you can't say Shema that way. So the Gemara initially thought that maybe this fits very well with Rabbi Yosef, but it doesn't fit with Shmuel. And the Gemara's conclusion is that you have to say there's an argument if it's allowed or not allowed. And Shmuel says that it is allowed. But there is a brisa, there are two brises. One brisa says it's allowed, one brisa says it's not allowed. And of course, Rabbi Yosef is going to understand the brisa that it's allowed is referring to his wife, and Shmuel is going to understand the brisa that it's allowed is referring to anyone. You would be allowed to go back to back, say Shema, and it's not a problem. Again, it's not so practical, these halachas nowadays. Very few people are so poor that they don't have pajamas and they don't have clothing. But I guess it could happen if a person was in a fire, ran out of their house. There was a fire, they had to run out. Who knows? They were whatever it is. They have no clothing. There could be a scenario maybe, but it doesn't seem like it's so practical anymore. Maybe in other countries, maybe like in Africa or somewhere. Okay, so anyway. The next Gemara talked about being back to back. Is there a problem with with the fact that a person's backside, is that considered an erva? Is that considered the private area as well? And then the Gemara says, you see from here it's not a problem. And the Gemara wanted to prove from the halachas of challah as well that a woman is allowed to take challah and even say a bracha, even though if she has no clothes on, she would be allowed to say a bracha and separate challah. Surprisingly, why would that be allowed? A man would never be allowed to do that, because a woman, if she's sitting and her feet are together, and so her private area is not visible. It's not. So it's closed. So it's considered covered. But by a man, it would not be considered covered, and therefore it would be prohibited. So the Gemara wanted to say, you see, she's sitting down, but the fact is that her backside is not fully covered. So that would obviously is not considered an erva, private area. The Gemara answers, no, it's talking about that it's soft ground, and therefore her body is flush with the ground. In other words, she sinks into the earth, maybe like sand or something, and therefore it's considered. It's no proof from that mission. Then the Gemara talked about a person is with their brought this the brisa about a person is with their family members, and if it's a child, it's not a problem to say Shema. Even the brisa that said you're not allowed to say Shema, you need to have a cloth separating you from your children. But the brisa said if it's young children, even there is for sure not a problem. So everyone seems to agree with young children. The question is, what is young children? What is the age? So the first opinion is, Rav Chizda said a girl up to 3 years old and a boy up to 9 years old. So once a girl reaches 3 and a boy reaches 9, that would be a problem for an adult to say Shema back to back with them. And but under that age, it's not a problem. The reason for that age is because at that age is considered to having relations. In other words, a boy that's 9 years old that has relations, that's called relations. A boy that's 8 years old that has relations, it's not called having relations. The same thing applies to a child under 3. If someone has relations with someone under 3, besides for being abuse, which would definitely be considered abuse, but it would not be called relations. It would only be called abuse. Above the age of 3 would be called relations, and therefore that would be the age where it would be prohibited to say Shema from above that age. Now, the next Gemara, the Gemara says, but some say that the age is 11 and 12, and both 11 and 12, that age is not exactly concrete. It's not exactly at 11 and 12. Both of those ages are up to the time when her breasts are developed and the hair has grown. So that would be the age. That would be the age 11 or 12. 11 for a girl, 12 for a boy. You would be allowed to say Shema back to back with one of those, as long as they haven't developed, as long as they've not 11 and developed their maturity has developed. If they're 11, let's say the girl is 11 and she has her breasts are not developed, it would still be allowed to say Shema. Once she reaches the age of 12, then it's a no-no. It's absolute. It's a blanket. rule. You would not be allowed to say Shema back to back with your daughter, that even though she's your daughter, but she's 12 years old. According to this opinion, there would need to be a blanket in between, or a garment, some type of something separated. Now, the same thing applies for a boy up to the age of 13, up to the age of 12 is fine. From the age of 12 to 13, it would depend on if he's developed here in his private area. Then it would be considered he's an adult. That would make him considered more of an adult. And even from the age of 12, and from the age of 13, then it's a blanket rule. You would not be allowed to say Shema with him once he reached that age, even if he did not grow hairs. But at the age of 12, once he grows hairs, that would be the limit. This is again for Shema purposes. These laws don't apply to other. Very rare to find halachas that apply to a boy that's 12 and a girl that's 11. There is one other scenario where we follow law of the age of 11 and 12, 11 for a girl and 12 for a boy, and that is regarding making a neder, making a mufla hasamach leish. It's a certain laws about if they know what they mean when they're saying a neder, when they're making a vow. But again, this is rare to find such a law that applies to boys that are 12 and women that are 11. And then the Gemara said that what is the halacha? Who does the halacha follow? Because before we said the halacha follows Shmuel, even though we had brises against him. So the Gemara wants to know would the halachas follow Shmuel here as well. So the Gemara said, what do you mean? Just because the halacha followed Shmuel there doesn't mean the halacha follows Shmuel everywhere. And then the Gemara said that if there's hair from private area that is sticking out of one's garment, is that considered a problem? Like, is that considered like the private area is revealed? And the answer, the Gemara says, sayer. Here is here, it's not a problem. So that was the conclusion of what we got up to on Friday. And now the Gemara continues. We're now about 12 lines up from the bottom of the page, maybe 13, 14 lines up from the bottom of the page. We're on 24a. Amar Rab Yitzchak, tefach be'isha erva. Rab Yitzchak says this vague statement. He says a tefach, one handbreadth, that's revealed by a woman is considered erva. It's considered private. It's considered like her private area that you would not be allowed to recite the Shema in front of. So in other words, one tefach that's exposed is prohibited. But he doesn't say Shema. He doesn't say anything. Just says a tefach by a woman is considered erva. So the Gemara asks, Lamai, what is this talking about? Ilema, if you mean to say le'istakule, but to gaze at her. Would a person be allowed to gaze at a woman at an area that should be covered and it's exposed? That's a tefach size. It's the size of a tefach. So again, the Gemara is thinking that maybe what it means is, let's say a woman, her skirt is up one handbreadth. Would you be allowed to gaze at that area that's above her socks and in between her skirt? Her skirt was up one tefach. Would you be allowed? Is that what the Gemara means? A tefach b'isha is an erva. You wouldn't be allowed to gaze at her. So the Gemara says, "V'ha amar Rav Sheshas," but Rav Sheshas says, "Lama mana hakosav tachshitin." This week's parsha, actually, the Torah clarifies when we talk about the garments, the jewelry of the Midianite women. The Midianites, we had a war with the Midianites, and there was different types of jewelry. And the pasuk clarifies, and it says the jewelry that are in revealed areas and jewelry that are in more private areas. And it says, why does the pasuk mention the jewelry that, in other words, why are they giving the Jewish people, the men of war? They said, we want to donate the jewelry of the women of Midian we want to donate it to Hashem. Why? It should be a kapara, a atonement for our bad thoughts. We had improper, impure thoughts because the Midianite women were enticing us, and therefore we had impure thoughts. We want to donate their jewelry. The thing is, that would make sense to donate the jewelry. They used to put a certain ring on their private area. The girls used to put a ring on their private area. So that jewelry would be a reason to donate it, because that would be an atonement. The other jewelry which is on their arm, on their hand, the ring, or on their bracelet on their arm, why does the Torah connect all the jewelry together, and it says it's an atonement? It says they're donating all this jewelry and it's all an atonement. What do you mean it's all an atonement? The private area jewelry would be the atonement. So the Gemara says, Rav Sheshis asks, Lama mana hakosov? Why does the Torah count tachshitin shebachotzim, tachshitin shebefnim? The jewelry that was on the outside of their bodies with the tachshitin shebefnim, with the jewelry that's on the private part of their bodies. Loimar lach, to tell you, kol mastakel be'etzba katana shalisha. It's teaching you a halacha that if a person gazes at a pinky of shel isha, of a woman, ki'ilu mistakel b'makam ha'torah, it's as if he gazed at her private area. Meaning, if a person is gazing at a female to cause himself, that, in other words, he's gazing at her, causing himself to have improper thoughts, that is just like he's gazing at her private area. And so, how could Rav Yitzchak, so now let's go back to our statement. Rav Yitzchak said a tefach, one handbreadth of a woman, would be considered an erva. Now, Rav Yitzchak is saying a tefach is considered an erva. Well, it doesn't. That's not so. Even a pinky would be considered an erva. Anything, any part of a woman's body to gaze at it, to bring up improper thoughts, would be considered erva. Would be considered inappropriate. It's not. It's not allowed. Person's not allowed to gaze at a female for the benefit of enjoyment of bringing up improper thoughts. Ella be'ishtai. Rather, we're talking about gazing at one's wife ula kriyashma, and for kriyashma, which means that if a person wants to say Shema, and his wife has, let's say, one handbreadth of her clothing that's normally covered, it's uncovered, that would be prohibited for him to say Shema. So let's say, for example, a woman is obligated to cover her arms until her elbows. Let's say she's wearing like an undershirt or something. So her elbows are not covered. Her shirt is very short, as like a short sleeve. It's not covered. So in that scenario, she would have to leave the room, or you would have to leave the room if you wanted to say Shema, or she would have to put something else on to cover it, because that would be a tefach, a handbreadth of her body that's normally covered, that should be covered, and it's not covered. That would be prohibited to recite Shema, and this is a special law regarding. This is a law regarding Shema that she would need to be, a tefach would be prohibited. Now, what about if it's less than a tefach? So if it's less than a tefach, it would be permitted. Some want to say that only applies to one's wife. If it's less than a tefach for other women, that would be, if it's a different woman, it would be prohibited. But that's not the halacha. The main halacha is that it applies to everyone. Tefach is the amount, and some say that it doesn't apply if you're just if she happens to be in the room, but you're not gazing at her. So it's only an issue if you're like staring at her. But if you happen to be in the room, but you're not really gazing at it, so it's a tefach. Again, it's not the private area. It's a part of her body that's normally that Jewish women cover. So being that it's a part of her body, it's not erva. But because it's normally supposed to be covered, and you're saying Shema, it could lead to what's called hirhur. It could lead to improper thoughts. So if you're gazing at her, that's a problem, because that could lead to improper thoughts if it's a tefach. But if you just happen to see her, if you're closing your eyes, then it would not be a problem, and some are lenient like that. Others say no, it applies whether you're you're looking at her or not. She's in the front of you. She's visible to you. If she's in front of you and she's visible to you, therefore it will be prohibited. So it's like similar to the laws of erva. It would be similar to the laws of if it was a private area, even though it's on her arm or lets her, another part of her body, but it's not. But it's normally covered, and therefore the custom would be to cover it. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going beyond my time over here. So I guess we'll have to stop over here. Okay, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. We'll see you later. That's Hashem.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.